Hare Krishna,
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी दंडवत प्रणाम जय श्री प्रभुपाद।
Dandavat Pranam. I'm really sorry. I was ready at 7 and then my Zoom wouldn't open and I had to restart and then the computer had to update. So everything just went haywire. So I'll do a very short Jai Radha Madhav and then we will get started. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Jaya Yashoda Nandana Jai Brajajana Ranjana Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe Jai Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jai Jaya Prabhupada Shri Radha Madhav ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining on this early Saturday morning. So today we are on text 9, is that correct?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, wonderful. We will start with the introductory prayers to the spiritual master. Om Jnanam Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadadi Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavansha Shri Rupa Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam, Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitangsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So here's the Isopanisad, mantras 9 to 11. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is a very general overview of this next section, which is mantras 9, 10, and 11. 9 deals with knowledge. It tells us about ignorance and pseudo-knowledge leading to darkness. Real knowledge leads to eternal life. So until now, we've talked about how the Mahabhagavats are seeing the Lord, how are they approaching the Lord. And now we're talking about the other side, the darkness. Mantra 11, we learn about nescience and transcendental knowledge side by side. So the Abhideya, and particularly mantra 11. And then mantra 11 also talks about the goal, which is to transcend birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So very unique verses coming up. This is a very interesting section. Only place in all Vedic literature where you will read that we should learn about nescience. So what is that? We will look more into that. So we must see the world through the eyes of the scriptures, Shastra Chakshu. And this section is really focused on knowledge. Guidelines for knowledge, guidelines for knowing what is real knowledge, what is false knowledge. This here is like an entire overview of the Isopanisad. So what is the link to previous verses? Having received the complete vision of the Sri Isopanisad in the invocation and mantras 1 to 8, we now receive further guidance on which types of knowledge to seek and which types of practices to follow, so that we may also realize this vision. We begin with guidelines for knowledge in mantras 9 through 11. So this is further guidelines on how to seek the right knowledge, how to gain the correct knowledge, and how we realize this vision that we have read about in text 1 through 8. So mantra 9, here it is. Andham tamaha pravishanti ye vidyamupasate tato bhuya ivate tamo yau vidyayam rata Andham tamaha pravishanti ye vidyamupasate tato bhuya ivate tamo yau vidyayamrata. Those who engage in the culture of nescient activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. So, very amazing verse. Those who engage in the culture of nescient activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. So what is ignorance, what is darkness, and what is so-called knowledge? Mantra 9. Those who neglect spiritual knowledge enter into darkness. This is the theme of this verse. Mantra 9 states that those who neglect spiritual knowledge shall be covered by darkness and ignorance, especially those who actively impede such knowledge. We can feel this covering of darkness or frustration in modern society, where we are so advanced in material knowledge, yet we ignore or even avoid spiritual education. People are more confused as to the purpose of life than ever. Material knowledge is certainly necessary and even beneficial as long as it is engaged in the Lord's service. But when it ignores spiritual life, such material knowledge is just another form of ignorance, which distracts us from our actual goal of realizing our eternal nature as spirit souls. Those who commit the worst harm to society are those who pretend to cultivate spiritual knowledge, but only misinterpret spiritual teachings. So in this world, we find people in material life, people who are completely absorbed in materialistic activities. And we also find people who are absorbed in spiritual knowledge, people who are very spiritually elevated. But we find a third category, and that is people who pose to be spiritually elevated, who are absorbing themselves in scripture and Bhagavad Gita and Vedas and Upanishads and all these things, but whose intent is to misinterpret it, to misguide others and misguide themselves. And that is so-called knowledge. That is the worst. That is the worst. So, by surrendering to Krishna, we get real spiritual knowledge. But some people are there who want to use the Gita to undermine Krishna, to cause harm to society, to misinterpret. And these people are very dangerous. Just like in India, we see many dhyanis and yogis who believe that by doing meditation, you become God, who believe that Krishna is just a human being. And these people, they undermine the process of devotional service. They are neglecting the real teaching of the Gita, which is manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Krishna repeats it twice, that think of me, become my devotee, offer your service unto me. They're neglecting the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam raja. They never tell their disciples that surrender to Krishna. Never. They say, you surrender to me. You worship my feet. You massage my feet, but don't worship Krishna. They never tell them to surrender. They never tell them to give up material habits. In fact, they encourage them in the process of eating, drinking, smoking, illicit sex, gambling, all these things. And their only goal is to try to control people through spirituality. Spirituality just becomes another form of control. And even in our own movement, in our own spiritual practice, we need to be aware and conscious of this. That why am I practicing devotional service? Why am I preaching Krishna consciousness? Why am I a devotee? Am I a devotee to actually be a servant? Am I preaching Krishna consciousness to actually attain the goal of life, which is to become the servant of the Lord 1,000 times removed? Or am I becoming a devotee because I want more and more control and influence? Am I becoming a devotee because I want to lord it over others? Of course, the path of spiritual life, particularly Krishna consciousness, is so wonderful that even if we have these desires, if we practice it very intensely, and if we chant and if we are engaged in the process, eventually Krishna purifies our heart. But we also have to consciously and conscientiously give up these desires from within our heart and desire to only engage in the transcendental loving service of Krishna. This mantra offers a comparative study of Vidya and Avidya. Avidya or ignorance is undoubtedly dangerous, but Vidya or knowledge is even more dangerous when mistaken or misguided. Be just here, perfect. This is exactly what Prabhupada is saying. Avidya or ignorance is undoubtedly dangerous. If you're in ignorance, that's dangerous. You don't have knowledge. But Vidya or knowledge is even more dangerous when mistaken or misguided. This mantra of Sri Isopanisad is more applicable today than at any time in the past. Modern civilization has advanced considerably in the field of mass education. But the result is that people are more unhappy than ever before because of the stress placed on material advancement to the exclusion of the most important part of life, the spiritual aspect. So there's so much vidya, so much knowledge in our modern educational system. People are more educated today than they were ever before. In previous civilizations, the majority of the population was uneducated. They were illiterate. They could not write or read. They were, farmers. They did, the workmen's. They were so many. They were just tradespeople. But what is the use of this education? Prabhupada is saying, what is the use of this education? If through this education we do not have any appreciation of the real purpose of life, then that education is worse than ignorance. It's worse than ignorance. Those farmers are more happy and more fortunate than the PhDs who are completely confused due to their material studies and very proud because of their material studies. They have no knowledge, but they're very proud. So, what is the definition of ignorance? The invocation explained the essence of real knowledge, that the Supreme Lord is the owner and controller of everything. The absence of that is ignorance. So any type of agnosticism, materialism that ignores the fact that Krishna is the controller of everything is ignorance. Killers of the soul, in mantra 3 that we had talked about, Atmaha, the killer of the soul, also refers to those who are materially ignorant and materially knowledgeable. So we had a general description in mantra 3, and the specific is here, that the killer of the soul is a person who absorbs himself in academic education but has no spiritual education. And I'm a university professor, and you can actually see this, that the people, some of the people who are the most unhappy are those who are just studying all the time, year after year, taking classes, searching for knowledge. They're not enjoying life, nor do they have spiritual knowledge. They just study and study and study, and it's like so heavy on the brain. So it's such a burden. It's so dry sitting in these classrooms for hours and hours, and the professor is getting paid to teach, the student is paying to learn, and the only reason the professor is there is because this is how he gets his paycheck. The only reason the students are there is because they need some title so that they can hopefully get some better job, or they're just lost, they're looking for the truth, they're not finding it anywhere. It's really killing the soul. They're like slaughterhouses, Prabhupada said, these educational institutions. There's no real cultivation of human spirit. There's no real cultivation of of knowledge that satisfies the self. It's just dying slowly in a classroom, in an office. Categories of those who don't surrender to Krishna. Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita 7:15. Who are those? The mudha, the fool, the naradhama, the lowest among men. The maya parhita jnana, those whose knowledge is stolen by ignorance. And asuram bhavam ashrita, the outright atheists. These are the 4 types of people Krishna describes who don't surrender to Krishna. And mantra 9, similarly, this mantra tells us who are these people who have so-called knowledge. Even in the purport of the Gita, Prabhupada describes that the maya parhita jnanas are more dangerous than the mudhas. The mudhas are foolish. They know that. People know that. They know that. They're fools. But the maya parhita jnanas are those who are externally very intelligent, but internally foolish. So they don't even, people don't even realize, they themselves don't realize the lack of their knowledge. So there are 2 categories. Veda Vadarata. These people misinterpret the Vedas for sense gratification. So this is where someone gives an interpretation on the Gita or the Vedas that suits his sense gratification, that pleases him and his disciples, but it doesn't lead them closer to Krishna. And the second category is the Maya Parhita Jnana, which are those who teach Mayavad philosophy. So this group of people, they're not interested in sense gratification, but they take the Upanishads and the Vedas and they interpret it in such a way as to deny Krishna any form, any body, to deny us any individuality, and they say everything is one. Everything is one. So therefore you are God, I am God. And therefore uh, uh, at one point all of us will merge together and everything will be one, and then you'll lose your individuality. You won't be able to love anyone. You won't have any face or eyes or arms. You'll just be one big Brahman. So these people also, their life is their knowledge is stolen. Their life is very unfortunate. They miss the transcendental ecstasy of serving Krishna, the transcendental exchange of love between the Lord and his devotee. See, love requires 2 people. You cannot love if there's only one person. Love means 2 people. So the philosophy of oneness or Mayavad philosophy, it inherently denies love. You just have to become a robot, because there's no love in oneness. Love means duality. In this world, we're searching for love, not the material love, which is so selfish and dissatisfying, but that spiritual love, which is unlimited, which fully satisfies the self, which is eternal, which is fully blissful and full of knowledge. That love is denied in an impersonal conception. So a very famous person, George Bernard Shaw, he said, "Be aware of false knowledge. It is more dangerous than ignorance." There's a famous saying, right? That you can wake up a person who's sleeping. You can wake up a person who's fast asleep. But you cannot wake up a person who is acting that they're sleeping. You cannot do that. A person who's just making a show that they're sleeping, that person you cannot wake up. Ignorance and pseudo-knowledge. The advancement of learning by a godless person is like a jewel, is as dangerous as a valuable jewel on the hood of a cobra. A cobra decorated with a valuable jewel is more dangerous than one not decorated. Why? Because the cobra with the jewel, it's lying on the ground, and the person goes and says, let me get this jewel. And so they touch the serpent. They touch the jewel, and then when they touch the jewel, they touch the serpent bites them. It looks so beautiful from the outside. It's shining, it's a jewel, and it's a real jewel. But then the serpent bites them. And also, it's described in the scriptures that the serpents who have jewels have more venom than the serpents who don't. In the same way, they did a study actually that all these very bad websites, the pornographic websites and illegal websites, hate websites, even these like racist websites, many of them come from students at Harvard, Stanford, like the top super intelligent students. They actually did a study. It was like this is a real news, and they were surprised and they're shocked. These are some of the most intelligent people. So if a person is very intelligent, then they can misuse knowledge, and they can misuse their knowledge even more. They can cause more harm. A foolish person cannot cause only a little bit of harm. But the people who cause a lot of harm in this world are often people who are geniuses. This is why, and people misunderstand Prabhupada and then they misinterpret it, but this is why Prabhupada, he said that Hitler was actually a very powerful leader, very powerful person. Because even to cause so much damage requires a lot of power. But that's why he's the most dangerous. Because he was very intelligent, very powerful, but he used it for the wrong purpose, and therefore he was more dangerous. He was more fallen. He was more, he was like a snake with a jewel on his head. So if a person is knowledgeable, intelligent, but they're misguided, then they can be more dangerous. And we have to be careful. Similarly, in spiritual life, if someone has, spiritual knowledge, but they want to misapply it, they can mislead more people. Wolves are dangerous, and wolves dressed as sheep are even more dangerous. Same point. Because the wolves dressed as sheep, you can't see that it's a wolf. They will attack in a hidden way. And this is why, so many years we see like Christians were fighting with Muslims, right? And they're fighting with each other, and they couldn't convert each other. But then they couldn't, destroy one another's faith. The Christians oftentimes attack the Muslim countries and try to, convert them or, change their religion or whatnot. Not successful. The Muslims, they tried to attack the Christians. For centuries, they've been doing that, trying to convert, not possible. But then television went in all these countries, the Christian countries, the Muslim countries, the Hindu countries. Internet went in all these countries. The cell phone went in all these countries. And what's happening? All these countries, the exact thing that they fought against, They're all losing their spirituality, their religion. They're all becoming materialistic, westernized, not becoming Christians, Muslims, or Hindus. They're all becoming materialists. They're losing their faith because actually it's more powerful. If you attack, head on, the other person will recognize the attack. They will defend. But if you go dressed in as a sheep through pseudo knowledge, then people cannot recognize the difference between knowledge and ignorance. And the point, what is the point? Therefore, the devotee is not impressed by these big titles and degrees. The devotee is not impressed by mundane knowledge in the way that the materialists are. And therefore, we should not be impressed by those things. Yes, it's a PhD, very nice. But what is his spiritual knowledge? What is his actual qualification? Okay, great Sanskrit scholar, knows so much Sanskrit. But are they surrendered to the spiritual master? Is their heart in the right place? Or is it just we are admiring their Sanskrit skills? Why is ignorance dangerous? Ignorance is also dangerous. We will think and do things which will lead to suffering and make it difficult to come to the right path. Ignorance leads to suffering. Ignorance leads to madness. Madness leads to suffering. Why is pseudo-knowledge worse than ignorance? The walls of the room are ignorance. The glass window is pseudo-knowledge. And the open door is knowledge. Such a nice example. The walls of the room are ignorance. The glass window is pseudo-knowledge. And the open door is knowledge. A bird trying to get out is likely to waste time and energy on the glass window and therefore not even attempt to find the open door. We are like the bird. We're trying to get out of this material life. Obviously, we won't go to the walls. There's no access there. But we spend so much time on the windows and not able to find the door. And this is so true. I spent 7 years studying at Oxford, did my master's and PhD there. Before that, I spent 5 years doing my undergraduate, and then actually 6.5 years doing my undergraduate and master's in America. It was like 12 years of college education, right? And I'm thinking, I think about it now. It's like so much time was wasted. And it's such an apt metaphor, just like the bird pecking on that window, thinking that, this way I'll get out, this will get out. And so much time is wasted in this material education. All because we want to set up the backup plan. If Krishna consciousness fails, if Bhagavatam fails me, if Bhagavad Gita fails me, then I'll have some other education for which I can, I can become materially prosperous. But imagine if that same time, the same 12 years were spent on in-depth study, so much time, hours and hours and hours of studying books and reading and taking exams. If that same time was spent in studying Srimad Bhagavatam, we'd be pure devotees. And we wouldn't even, nothing material would affect us or bother us. But we didn't invest our time in that. And we see devotees, even they will become 30 years old, 40 years old, they'll keep going back for courses. We see Indians like this. One lady, she's like a new lady, congregational lady, very nice. She comes to Mangal Arati almost every day. And she's saying, I want to go back for my PhD. I'm just craving for more, studies. Studied so much, and has a husband and kids and all these things, and wants to go back now for yet another PhD for God knows what. What will they gain? What juice will you squeeze from your new textbooks, new classes? Already did a bachelor's and master's. Already, chewing the chew, like Prahlad Maharaj said, Punascharvita Charvananam. Already experienced this for 7 years, didn't get any pleasure. but now want more pleasure. And it's actually similar to like bar hopping. We do, course hopping. Like we go from one bar to another and we don't get pleasure, so we keep trying new and newer bars, and people don't find pleasure. In the same way, we take newer and newer classes, but the same thing, no pleasure, no satisfaction. The soul is not satisfied. And then the libraries, so to say, the houses of knowledge with books. These wealthy people, they'll fund millions of dollars for great libraries. And I hope my university doesn't hear this recording. And the libraries, you go in there, it's just filled now these days with just trash magazines, because the students don't want to actually read anything that requires a little bit of effort. Books like Shakespeare and Plato and Socrates, these are like impossible books. People don't even have attention spans for 10 minutes now, what to speak of reading these books like this. So it's just filled with magazines and big screens in every room. These big, God knows why they need all these big, huge screens in every single study room, so that the students can come and like work on one slide and then show it to each other. Like they can't, use their laptop to show it to one another. And then they have the largest section of the library is the big computer lab. And in this computer lab, you go in there, it's like, okay, this is the library, people are studying computer. The students are studying there with their headphones on. Someone's, on YouTube, watching the latest, concert by such and such, star, Jimi Hendrix, whoever the big people are these days, um, Taylor Swift, I think, and all these big people. Someone else is on their Facebook, just watching their Facebook. Someone is, doesn't all they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to go into a master's PhD program, and then 60% of the time what they do is they sit on Facebook and YouTube, and the whole world is hooked on these things, and they just look at films of people doing all sorts of daredevil activities, or watching the news or whatnot, the same things that people are doing without spending $100,000. And then the teachers, they students have spent so much, so they've given clear directions by the administration that they're graduate students, you have to pass every single one of them. I was like this, I was teaching one graduate class to MBA students, MBA student class, and there's one student who's she's not showing up, she's not doing any of the work. The other students are, but then that one student isn't, and the student is failing. So the student complains to the chair and the dean. So then the dean comes to me and says, some or the other, this is the last semester of the student, then the last class. Somehow we have to pass this student. You just do something, let them pass. They paid so much money. And that's probably what she did in every class. In every class, I think, oh, well, she studies so much, but in this class, let her just pass. And somehow they just pass and life goes on. So this is material education. So, and as Indians especially, we have so much faith in education. Day and night, we want our children to just study and study. And they become more and more proud. They become more and more dry, and they don't get anything. So education has its place, but we should not be like the bird pecking the window, hoping to find the truth, hoping to find freedom by pecking on that window. We have to find the true door, which is spiritual knowledge, which is Vedic wisdom. We have to find the real thing, not this material knowledge. Nationalism and modern universities, these do not pretend to be spiritual, but they do claim to give knowledge which will lead to a happy life. So this is mantra 9. What time is it? Okay, we can do one more mantra, mantra 10. Anya deva hurvidyaya nyadahura vidyaya iti shushu madhirana Yenastad vichachakshire. The wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge. And another result I cannot see the boxes here. Is everyone still there? Can people hear me?
Yes, Prabhuji,
Yes,
we can hear
Prabhuji.
you and we can see the screen.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yes. The wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. So one result from the culture of knowledge, and another result from the culture of nescience. One result from cultivating spiritual knowledge, and another from neglecting it. What you put in, that's what you get out. So if we invest in spiritual knowledge, we get one result. If we neglect that very most important function of human life, we'll get another result. Mantra 9 described the results of cultivating ignorance and false knowledge. Mantra 10 explains that true knowledge brings a different result than either of these. It also emphasizes the need to take guidance from Adhira in the act of discriminating between real and illusory knowledge. So the summary of Mantra 10 is here. In Mantra 10, we hear from authorities that a certain result is derived from culturing spiritual knowledge, and a different result is derived from neglecting such knowledge. Because knowledge of the soul is not being taught in modern education, there is animosity in all social, political, and religious fields today. As we attempt to dominate this material nature more and more, not considering its creator or purpose, the result is we fall more and more into fighting and war. Along with cultivating knowledge of this material world, we must also acquire spiritual knowledge from the self-realized souls who understand our common eternal spiritual nature in relation to the Supreme Lord. So we see Prabhupada's purports and these books are always so relevant, and they couldn't be more relevant than today's time. Right now we have two wars going on in this world, big wars. And this new war, like between Israel and Gaza, the Hamas, you see completely how this is completely a result of a lack of spiritual knowledge, a lack of neglecting spiritual knowledge. And you can see that behind these wars are just leaders who are inciting innocent, innocent people to take up weapons and do these things. They are providing the weapons to them. It's all part of their big strategy. Now, Russia knows that the US is providing weapons to Ukraine. And as long as it provides weapons to Ukraine, Ukraine will keep fighting and stay strong. So to reduce the inflow of weapons in Ukraine, reduce the stockpile that the United States has to give, they can only give so much, they have to keep some for themselves for the protection of their own country. Now they're starting a war there because they know that the US will support Israel, and if Israel needs weapons, they have more loyalty to Israel. They're going to send their weapons, their planes, everything to Israel. And when they send it to Israel, then Ukraine will get less. And so that way Ukraine will lose. So therefore they've armed these militants who before had nothing. All of a sudden they're so powerful. They can attack Israel with hundreds of these powerful rockets. Where did they get it from? It's such a poor country. They are arming them with these weapons. And they are little fanatic people, like this. They're arming them so that they can cause destruction. and create the war, knowing that then Israel will fight back and they'll all die. They won't be successful, but then the weapons will be used up. So this is the attempt to dominate material nature, and this is because of leaders who are not spiritually enlightened. And that is the result when, as a society and as individuals, we don't culture spiritual knowledge. When the only aim in life becomes material progress, material happiness, material sense gratification, and prosperity, then just see more than ever before wars in every corner of this world. I mean, these are the two big ones. Then you see, like 5 wars going on in Africa between this leader and that leader, this rebellious group, that rebellious group, then China and Taiwan. Like the whole world, it's at war. Every nation is at war with another nation. No one can sit peacefully. No one has any peace in their mind that they can just not fight for some time. As advised in chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita, 13:8-12, one should culture knowledge in the following way. One should become a perfect gentleman. Prabhupada actually gives us how we can culture knowledge. How do we actually become happy, ideal people? One should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. 2, one should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. One should not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. What an amazing sentence here. One should not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. For anyone, imagine a person like Srila Prabhupada, we have this beautiful image here, who's so wonderful that they never become a source of anxiety for others. One should learn forbearance, even in the face of provocation from others. Once again, so beautiful. One should learn forbearance, even in the face of provocation from others. Where do we get instructions like this? Where do we find this? I mean, this must be the highest knowledge, because who in the world speaks like this? Even this first one should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. Then one should not give anxiety to others. Then one should be forbearant, said, okay, I'm not giving anxiety to others, but others are provocating me, right? We say the first thing is, well, I should not give anxiety. Well, I'm not. I'm a peaceful person. I'm a nice person. But then I still get agitated because, look, I'm nice, but these people are disturbing me, right? We hear this all the time. These people are provocating me. They're mistreating me. They're disturbing me. Prabhupada is saying one should learn forbearance even in the face of provocation from others. And one of the ways this manifests, I've personally practicing kind of noticed in my own life, is patience, through patience, waiting until Krishna changes things. And when we become patient and we let Krishna change things, like we wait for his plan to manifest, then Krishna then changes things. When we've learned what we need to learn, when we're forbearant and patient, then Krishna starts to change things. But as long as we're in anxiety that things have to change before I can change, then it doesn't change. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said that when we are suffering, when we are being disturbed or harassed by someone else, then we are suffering the results of our previous karmas. And he says, and then when we retaliate, when we fight back, then we are continuing that cycle of karma. So then it continues to increase. So someone harasses us because something we did to them in their past life, and then we respond and retaliate. Well, they were burning off the karma. We were burning off our karma when they were retaliating to us. Now, when we retaliate back, then we've created new karma, because now they are going to retaliate back to us. Someone is going to retaliate back to us. So we don't break the cycle. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that the devotee is forbearant. Why? Because he understands that I'm burning off my past karma. This is unloading, this experience is unloading my past sinful activities. And if I let it finish, then it finishes. But if I now become agitated again, then I need to get what the karma that I had that I'm getting. But then when I give it back again, then there's new karma that needs to come back to me. So even in the face of provocation, everyone can be forbearant and peaceful in good circumstances. But the quality of a person is known how they are forbearant even in provocating circumstances. The greatness of a person, Prabhupada says, this is his quote, he says, the greatness of a person is known by how they can tolerate provocating circumstances. One should learn to avoid duplicity in his dealings with others. So we should not be duplicitous. A devotee is very simple. So therefore people like a devotee. They're not like, they're very simple. What's inside is outside. Number 6, one should search out a bona fide spiritual master who can lead him gradually to the stage of spiritual realization. And one must submit himself to such a spiritual master, render him service, and ask relevant questions. So these first 5 qualities can manifest from practicing the 6th quality. If we search out a spiritual master, if we are willing to take guidance from the spiritual master, if we submit ourselves to the spiritual master and offer service and ask questions, then they will purify us. But then it's not easy, right? Why number 6 makes the first 5 happen? Because then when they give us an instruction, then we sometimes struggle to follow it, because their instruction is made to make us gentlemen. And to be gentlemen, we have to practice forbearance and tolerance, and become free from our anarthas. And the only way they can make us practice forbearance and tolerance is if they put us in difficult circumstances, or they ask us to tolerate those difficult circumstances. So we see how all these things are connected. Rendering service to a spiritual master means following their instruction, and following their instruction automatically teaches us forbearance and tolerance. And if we're forbearant and tolerant, then we can follow their instruction and we can become purified. So that is the true path of knowledge. These 6 principles have more knowledge than a PhD offered by Harvard University. Those PhDs, they don't know these 6 things. And the devotee knows these 6 things, and therefore he's more cultured in the process of spiritual knowledge. Number 7, in order to approach the platform of self-realization, one must follow the regulated principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures. So, spiritual life means following the regulated principles. 8, one must be fixed in the tenets of the revealed scriptures. 9, one should completely refrain from the practices which are detrimental to the interest of self-realization. 10, one should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. 11, one should not falsely identify himself with the gross mature body. nor should one consider those who are related to his body to be his own. 12. One should always remember that as long as he has a material body, he must face the miseries of repeated birth, old age, disease, and death. There is no use in making plans to get rid of these miseries of the material body. The best course is to find out the means by which one may regain his spiritual identity. So wonderful. "13. One should not be attached to more than the necessities of life required for spiritual advancement." Same point. One should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. One should not make plans to get rid of the miseries of the material body. Best is to find out the means by which one may regain his spiritual identity. This is the key thing. We should be greedy to know what is my spiritual identity, what is my spiritual form, what is my eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. We should be greedy for it. We should crave for that. And therefore, one should not be attached to more than the necessity of life required than for spiritual advancement. Same principle. And then here we said, where does it go here? One should not falsely identify with the gross body or consider those who are related to his body to be his own. Here it's further emphasizing same point. One should not be more attached to wife, children, and home than the revealed scriptures ordain. So we all have to be attached to our families, but not more than the scriptures ordain. Meaning we cannot just become everything for family, beg, borrow, and steal simply for family. Family so attached that one is performing all sorts of illegal activities for the family. Prabhupada was just saying in one lecture I was hearing that how the man goes and steals for his family. But then when he goes to jail, then the family says, no, I don't even know this person. They don't go to jail with him. So that is having more attachment to family than ordained by the scriptures. Right? We see a national drama happening just like this. Right? Our previous president, he cheated on his taxes, and all for his family, and he was making his family minister this, that, of different areas. And now that same family, you don't see them standing next to him. That's the one thing that's very peculiar. Before, they're always, when he was president, standing right next to him, his son, daughter, all of them around him. And now when he's getting sued for all the illegal activities he did, none of the family members are visible anywhere near him. They're all trying to distance him. No, this was the Trump business. We were not involved in this business. We didn't do anything in this business. It's all his own creation. But when his business was flourishing, then they wanted the money. So we should not be more attached than what the scriptures say, because these people will not save us at the end of our life. It is the Supreme Lord. It is Dharma. It is the principles of religion that are going to save us. It is the saintly people, the association of the great devotees, which includes our wife, children. If we see them as devotees, if we serve them as devotees, if we help them as devotees, that will help us. Not if we see them as, functions for our sense enjoyment, as vestibules, as objects of enjoyment. One should not be happy or distressed over desirables and undesirables, knowing that such feelings are just created by the mind. One should become an unalloyed devotee of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and serve him with rapt attention. One should develop a liking for residence in a secluded place with a calm and quiet atmosphere, favorable for spiritual culture, and one should avoid congested places where non-devotees congregate. The exception to this is if we are wanting to preach. If we want to preach, then we should go to the most congested places, because it's a fact that the big cities are the best places to preach, because the people are there. And I've, lived in small places and preached there, and lived in big places and preached. And actually, it's a fact that there's so many people to preach in big cities. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur therefore says, actually, in one place, that the devotee goes to the most populated city, the biggest city, and he goes in the most populated area, and he sits right in the middle of that area, and he preaches Krishna consciousness. And we see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said this, and this is exactly what Srila Prabhupada did. He left Vrindavan Dham, which was a peaceful place with a quiet atmosphere, and he came to America, which is already a big thing. Then when he comes to America, he comes to Boston, which is a pretty big city. And there, from there, he goes to Gopal Agarwal's place, who recently just passed away, he and Sally Agarwal. And he goes to a pretty big city. And he's there, he has a place, he has a base. He could start preaching Krishna consciousness, but he leaves that place and he goes to the biggest city in America, the most important city in the world, Prabhupada's exact words. He goes to New York City and he sits right in the middle of the Bowery where all the people are, and he starts to preach Krishna consciousness, and look at his success. So Prabhupada himself showed that that is the highest residence, to live where there's service, to live where one can, that is the greatest peace, actually. When one is preaching Krishna consciousness, then one actually experiences great peace. It's actually true, we'll feel very empty inside until we don't preach, and we don't actually, like, not just preach in the sense like we go to the temple and wash dishes. That's also preaching. That's very nice preaching, but preach in the sense that directly we invite our friends and we do a program at our home, or we go and distribute books on the street. That is more special service. Prabhupada says this, that those who actually go out and risk and preach Krishna consciousness are doing a service that's very dear to Krishna, and you feel the reciprocation. So that is a quiet place is the mode of goodness, but a place where we're preaching and serving, that is transcendental. That is even higher than a secluded place. And finally, last one should become a scientist or philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge, recognizing that spiritual knowledge is permanent, whereas material knowledge ends with the death of the body. So I just, finished, criticizing material education for a long time, but here is the positive side, that if one has to go and study, one can do it by utilizing that education, those degrees, in the service of spiritual life, in researching spiritual knowledge and then sharing that knowledge. And again, just like the only reason we would live in a big city is to preach Krishna consciousness, the only reason we go to a academic center and do a PhD is to preach Krishna consciousness. That is the only reason. Otherwise, we don't do it. In the modern society, even a boy thinks himself self-sufficient and pays no respect to elderly men due to the wrong type of education being imparted in our universities. Boys all over the world are giving their elders headaches. Thus, Sri Isopanisad very strongly warns that the culture of nescience is different from that of knowledge. The universities are, so to speak, centers of nescience only. University students today are not given instructions in the regulated principles of brahmacharya, celibate student life, nor do they have any faith in any scriptural injunctions. Prabhupada is so perceptive. He's so true, right? No one follows the principles of brahmacharya at university now. In fact, it's completely the opposite. And therefore, they have no good qualities. When they have no, principles, and they're simply interested in, sex life and this boyfriend, girlfriend thing, then they have no respect for the elders. They have no respect for their parents, for their teachers. They have no capacity to focus on their studies because all they're thinking about, they're young, it's just the new thing in their life, and they have full access to everything, full liberty for everything. So they're just thinking of, satisfying their senses. So they have no capacity to focus on their studies. What to speak of following scriptural injunctions? And this is the situation of the modern youth. And as they grow older, then they put their elderly parents in a nursing home and visit them a few times a year. So they are very ungrateful. You see that, like, very, you do a favor for them, they don't feel any sense of gratitude that they should return that favor or do something for someone else. A great feeling of entitlement, no feeling of responsibility. That's, someone did something for me, they raised me, they cared for me, and I should reciprocate. And Krishna is spiritual life is not just about, worshiping God. Krishna is not pleased by such activities. He actually says this to Vasudeva and Devaki in the 10th canto, that if a person acts in such an ungrateful way, and if the children do not take care of their parents when they become elders, then Krishna says there's a special hell for them. They have to go to the hellish planets and suffer there for many, many years. And I'll spare you the details of what Krishna says, but it's very, very gruesome, that hellish planet. So Krishna is pleased by dharma. We were discussing this yesterday, that Maharaj Yudhishthira was so dear to Lord Krishna that Krishna would never do anything. He would never fail to do anything that Yudhishthira Maharaj would ask him to do. Anyone else would ask him, Krishna did or didn't do. It was up to him. But if Maharaj Yudhishthira asked anything, Krishna would fulfill it, because he was so dear to him. And Maharaj Yudhishthira was so exalted that when he would walk, he would not touch the ground. He would float as he would walk. So that is the fact, that dharma pleases the Lord. So mantra 10 purport. Sri Isopanisad, as an authorized scripture, this mantra states that the instructions of vidya, knowledge, must be acquired from adhira. Adhira is one who is not disturbed by material illusion. No one can be undisturbed unless he is perfectly spiritually realized, at which time one neither hankers nor laments for anything. Adhira realizes that the material body and mind he has acquired by chance through material association are but foreign elements. Therefore, he simply makes the best use of a bad bargain. One can become adhira only by submissive hearing from a bona fide spiritual master. Arjun, for example, became adhira by submissively hearing from Lord Krishna, the personality of God in himself. Thus, the perfect disciple must be like Arjuna, and the spiritual master must be as good as the Lord himself. This is the process of learning vidya, knowledge, from the dhira, the undisturbed. This sentence here is very powerful. No one can be undisturbed unless he is perfectly spiritually realized, at which time one neither hankers nor laments for anything. And the Dhira realizes that the material body and mind is acquired by chance through material association. So, when one is spiritually realized, one doesn't hanker or lament for anything. Okay, so that's the end of mantra 10. This is the true, you could say, hallmarks of spiritual knowledge. Krishna is telling us what is the true signs of spiritual knowledge. We will be undisturbed, we will be peaceful, we will be unaffected by lamenting or hankering, and will become spiritually realized. So I'll stop here. If there's any comments, questions, reflections.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam.
Krishna.
Thank you for a wonderful class. I had one quick question about the first.
You got muted, Prabhu. Somehow muted. Oops, now we lost him. Yashoda Vatsala Prabhu. Oh no, Prabhu. We can't hear you. Rajiva Sham Prabhu, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu,
Yes,
for
yes.
a wonderful class. I had one question about you gave the three verse overviews for 9th, 10th, 11th. Then you mentioned about 9th and 10th were more to do with maintaining, cultivating relationship, right? Trying to remember the exact sambandha.
Yes, Sambandha. Text 9 particularly.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Text.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yes.
No, I was just trying to relate how that is.
How is that Sambandha? Oh, very nice. Okay. So Sambandha here refers to, let me go back to my notes here. So Sambandha actually, yeah, it very much relates. You're right, actually. Going back to my notes, all three verses, we didn't do text 11, but 9, 10, and 11 deal with Sambandha. Because what is Sambandha? Sambandha is the platform of knowledge. Sambandha is knowledge about our relationship with Krishna. So these verses are talking about knowledge. Text 9 was about those who engage in the culture of nescient activities enter into the darkest region of ignorance. So worse still are those who are engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge, right? So Krishna is talking about so-called knowledge, that is Sambandha. Next stage is Abhideya, which is practice, developing that relationship with Krishna. So once we have knowledge about Krishna, that's Sambandha, then we can practice it, and that's Abhideya. And then love of God, that is Prayoja. So text 9, because it's talking about so-called knowledge, is differentiating real knowledge from knowledge, is therefore about Sambandha. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That makes sense, bro. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Yashoda Vatsala Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada. What a wonderful session. And, those last 3 slides were cream of everything. And yeah, it is bringing me to the real topic of, how I can be a Krishna conscious and what things I should do. Coming out of the proprietorship, very first thing to surrendering and understanding that this is what Krishna's world is. I'm just a foreigner here. And yeah, thank you so much for helping, how knowledge is important to develop my relationship with Krishna.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think you are some, Prabhuji, I keep listening to a lot of lectures. So you said, like, so if you want to know about some famous person, that more you try to get knowledge about that person.
Mm.
So the same way, like, here we are actually trying to get knowledge about Krishna,
Mm.
so that we develop that loving relationship with him. And thank you for giving us that flavor there. And yeah, too much to talk, but yeah, wonderful session today, Prabhuji. I feel blessed to be part of this Bhakti Shastra session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhu, for your very encouraging words, actually. I also really like these verses. Isopanisad, we don't think of it as a very central or powerful book. It's not one of the books that generally are the main books that we think of in Krishna consciousness. But we see that Prabhupada, he really, there's so many Upanishads, but he only translated this one. And there's only certain books that he did. And we see why he gave this book to us, because there's so much spiritual knowledge. So deep. And it's one of actually my favorite books. So yes, Prabhu, thank you.
I had a follow-up question related to your point about the material education that you were talking about, Prabhuji. I want to say, like 8 years or 12 years of study, but end of the day, being Grihastha, we have to do some good earning, and for our daily living, for us and our family, that we have taken care and we have been. So how should we deal with that kind of learning? It has a deeper purpose, like, it will strengthen my
Yes.
relationship with my
Yes.
family also, if I'm able to feed them, and then I'll get time.
Yes.
Because if I'm not able to feed
Yes.
them, then I will not be able to think of Krishna.
Yes.
Maybe. I'm sorry.
Yes. No, so that is true. And I myself, I've done a PhD. But the point simply is that we have to see it for what it is. We understand that material education is important, especially if we plan to enter the household life. But it's not the goal of life, right? What the problem is when we see so many families where material education becomes everything. The parents, all they think about is the education of the children, the education. So much so that they won't bring the children to satsang or temple or anything like this because they feel that they have exams tomorrow. That's why I didn't bring them. They have this, therefore I didn't bring them. So, but of course we also have to care for their exams and all those things. But we have to understand that spiritual life is more important. That's the point. Spiritual knowledge is more important than material knowledge. So that is the main point. Everything
So nicely
has
said.
to be balanced.
Yeah, very, very good example that you give, Prabhu, where I'm, sailing the same path, with the kids in college and high schools and all, and you get excuses that I have this, I have that, I won't come with you. So, and then Prabhupada says you have to also give time. So I don't know how to balance that, how to balance those things, like we cannot push, especially in US, we cannot push the kids that you have to simply come with me. I'm trying still my best, and don't want to become Hitler.
Well, also then they'll rebel. You see, if you do it, because so we have to first. I mean, we have to see how much influence we have over them, but then whatever influence we have, we should prioritize what is most important, right? So how to balance? We balance things by doing what is most important first. So if spiritual life is most important for us, then we do that first. Then material life, we can compromise. But on our spiritual life, we don't. So that's a big topic, how to raise children. And, can't get into the details of that. But yes, we have to encourage as much as possible towards spiritual life. Yes.
Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you very much.
You.
Hare
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Rancher Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the wonderful class. Sorry, I've been a little bit busy lately with school and everything, so it's been difficult for me to join live. But it was very refreshing joining today.
Thank
I
you.
had one question on the topic of living in a secluded place except for the point of preaching. Sometimes when we have to preach, like we have to preach in places that put us very dangerously close to the modes of material nature, where sometimes the conversation isn't so high quality. There may be people who are in lower modes. Like even in like my personal experience, like for college preaching, I may have to discuss just to network with students, connect with students on a level that don't understand me, at least to like listen to me. I may have to engage in prajalpa. I may have to do all these things. So how do we understand that? How close or far should we stay away from the material energy in order to preach?
So Prabhupada says that if we find a situation where it's affecting us, then maybe we're not advanced enough to preach in that situation, right? So Lord Nityananda could go inside a bar and preach inside a bar, but we cannot go inside a bar and preach there because that association will affect us. So if it's affecting us to the point that our spiritual life is suffering and our mind is, gets very agitated, then we have to avoid it. Just like there was one devotee, he was a brahmachari. He wasn't a student. Like you are a student is a different thing, but he was a brahmachari in Saffron. And he told me very plainly, he said, I don't go to colleges and preach. Because when I'm at the university, it brings back some memories and things that agitates my mind and creates desires in me to want to, go back to that life that I had before he had joined Krishna consciousness at a later age. And so he preached nonstop, but he preached in other places. He preached on street corners, and he preached to people in downtown and all these things. He just wouldn't go to the university. In the same way, some of us may feel comfortable in certain situations and uncomfortable in other situations. But the key thing is we should preach. But we have to preach based on our level of advancement and in a way that's suitable for our ashram. So a sannyasi may not be able to preach to women, but a woman may be able to preach to other women, a senior Mataji, right? So same thing with the college students. You may not want to preach or interact with the female students. You have to leave it for someday a devotee female student coming, and you interact with the men students. Or if you have to, because that's the nature of college preaching, then you have to see, is it affecting me or not? Or do it just enough that it doesn't affect you. So first principle is we have to protect ourselves. And second principle is that we have to, while protecting ourselves, find ways in which we can preach Krishna consciousness. Yes. Because association matters a lot. Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very nice question. Okay, I think we are at the end, 8:30. We'll stop here. Thank you very much, everyone, for your kind attention. And please keep completing the homework, and we'll meet next week. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol. Hare